Well, it's 7 o'clock, so I am going to begin tonight's meeting. Good evening, residents of Blind River, council, staff, and members of the press. We begin tonight's public meeting with the acknowledgement that the land on which we are gathered is in the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, specifically Mississauga. We would also like to acknowledge the North Channel Métis Council. We say miigwech, to thank Indigenous people for taking care of this land from time immemorial. We are called to treat this sacred land, its plants, animals, stories, and its people with honor and respect. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to highlight proposed changes to the Town of Blind River's user fees, as well as presenting the 2022 draft budget. This draft is the result of months of planning by senior management staff, council, and our treasurer. The process started in September 2021, and in subsequent months, many changes have been made. The draft was presented to the Budget Committee on January 24th, and the Budget Committee recommend that this be shared at tonight's public meeting, and then presented to Council on February 7th, 2022 for review and final approval. Your feedback is important. I would ask that all residents keep your questions brief and to the point. Each person will begin given 3 minutes, and then we will move on to another attendees at tonight's meeting for their comments or questions. I ask that you respect the hard work and dedication that has gone into the budget process. We are working hard together to make Blind River a place where we can all live, work, and play together. Now, moving on to the agenda. I have a motion, be it resolved that council approve the agenda as presented. This is moved by Councillor Betty Ann Dunbar, seconded by Councillor Stephen Wells. All in favor? And that's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move on to tonight's presentation of administrative reports. The first is the draft municipal user fees, and I will turn it over to our treasurer, Ms. Dent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the first part of the presentation this evening, we're going to talk about their proposed municipal user fees. And just a bit of background. So user fees are charged under Section 391 of the Municipal Act. And they're charged to individuals or groups for the provision of programs or services and help offset the costs associated with operating those programs and services. Generally classified into the following categories: public services, which are benefit to the general public, and it's either impossible or undesirable to exclude some of those using or enjoying the benefits of those services. Private services benefit specific individuals or groups or businesses, and in this case, it is possible to prevent someone from using the service. And then the mixed services, which are benefit general public as well as specific individuals and groups. I just put together a bit of a graphic here to kind of illustrate the who benefits, the type of service, and the payment for those services. So general community services are public, 100% tax funded. Things like police services or fire services, where you wouldn't want to and you can't actually exclude anyone from benefiting from those services. Ones that are primarily the community or primarily the individual are mixed public and individual services with some tax funding and some user fee funding. And then the individual benefit only would be 100% user fees. So an example of an individual service would be in the case of water and wastewater services, where we do exclude people because the infrastructure does not run to all areas of town to where all residents live. So there are some people who cannot access those services and should not be paying for those services. Over the last 3 years, the town has done a number of reviews. We started in 2019 with the service delivery review. And out of that came a number of opportunities for consideration that are specifically relevant to tonight's discussion, including general user fees, the approach to landfill revenues, and shifting to a full cost recovery model for our building services. That was followed up in 2020 with an administrative process review, which was more designed to look for efficiencies within our operations. And then in 2021, kind of part 3 of the series, we did an actual user fee study. A couple of the objectives there were to assess our current user fees and to identify any potential opportunities for user fees that were not currently being charged by the town. This final report was presented to council in September of 2021. And specifically a number of opportunities for consideration for increases, including in solid waste management, building and planning services, and our cemetery operations. I'm not going to read all of the information on these slides, but this is taken directly from the results from the report that was presented to council. So solid waste management, as you can see, the town's cost recovery is lower than our comparator average. We're at about 12% versus 36% in the comparator group. And all of these obviously informed our decisions about where we're going with our user fees in 2022. You can see at the bottom there in the middle under the rationale. If you live in Wawa, it's going to cost you $42 to drop off a full load at the dump, and in Blind River, it's currently $10. Also highlighted some of the specific fees across our comparator group, and no one else in the comparator group actually offers any free bags of garbage, whereas Blind River is 2 free bags per week. Building services, as was identified in the initial service delivery review, and again in the user fee study, would like to move towards full cost recovery. In this area, don't know that we'll ever get there, and most of our comparator group is not there either, but we are moving more in that direction. And certainly with seeing our costs increasing with the Tulloch Engineering being our CBO and providing our planning services, we're seeing significant increases in both of those departments. Planning services, again, moving towards a full cost recovery. And in this case, they were able to show us some specific comparators for some of our fees. And you can see that we are anywhere from 40 to 66% lower than the comparator average. And cemetery services was the 4th major area that was identified as requiring possible increases. And again, our cost recovery at the cemetery is about 35% lower than the comparator average. Not all of our fees are lower, some of them are higher. You can see we have one here that is above the comparator average, but for the most part, our user fees at the cemetery are well below the comparator average. Another report study that we had, or I guess plan we had to do last year, was our water and wastewater financial plan needed to be redone. And that was adopted by council in December, and this set out the required increases to meet future demands for both our water and wastewater services. As was discussed during the committee meeting with respect to water and wastewater fees, this plan, and all of the plans actually for that matter, are living documents and are not going to remain static. We will be revisiting them on a regular basis to make sure that they still reflect the current situation and the current requirements for the municipality. I'm not going to go through line by line on the user fees for the various areas. They were provided in the schedules that were attached to the agenda. Within community services, so the museum, the arena and community center, the senior center, and the marina, there are some increases being proposed. but overall, not a lot of changes there. Within the protective services, obviously is animal control, fire, building and planning. And there are significant increases in the building and planning fees. As was discussed, we are well below where our comparator groups are, and we should be moving towards full cost recovery within those areas. Water and wastewater. So the financial plan did identify an average increase of 9.2% over the 10-year period of the plan. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot, and it needs to be a lot because we have a lot of things that we need to be doing. But for the average residential user, that 9.2% works out to 24 cents a day. In the actual plan, the actual increase that they were suggesting, if we were to do it specifically year by year instead of using the average, the actual increase for 2022 was recommended to be 49.9%. So we thought it much better to average that out over the years, use the 9.2%. And as I mentioned earlier, we will continue to revisit this plan as we identify potential cost savings or other projects that need to be attended to. This may change from year to year, but we will, as I said, revisit that and reevaluate it each year as we need to. The user fees for the administration area, that includes some general fees specific to the clerk's department and our cemetery fees, as was mentioned earlier. This is also one that was identified in the user fee study as requiring significant increases. And there's it also includes our licensing, and I don't believe we have any increase in the licensing fees for 2022. Nor within the general fees either. I believe within the clerk's department, there is a slight increase to the marriage license fee. Our public services, so the landfill fees, we are proposing some increases across the board for landfill fees and some increases in the charge out rates for our public works department. And as the mayor mentioned at the beginning, the budget committee is recommending to council that the proposed 2022 user fees be approved. I know I have in the agenda that questions will be after both presentations, but Madam Mayor, I think we could take, if there's specific questions related to the user fees, we could do that now.
Sorry. Yeah. Were there any questions that were sent in prior to the meeting that you were aware of? No.
Not specifically related to user fees, no.
Oh, all right. And are there any questions tonight as they relate to user fees? I'm not seeing any hands going up. And Pam or Karen, do you see any hands from our attendees?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Then Sue, without any questions, you can go forward to the draft 2022 budget.
All right. This button instead. Okay. So on to the draft capital operating budget for 2022. So we did begin meeting with the budget committee in September, but staff started this process earlier in August, starting to think about what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go with their departments this year. We did get direction from the committee that they did not want to see a tax rate increase greater than 2.5%. We were not able to do that in the first draft. We actually came in significantly over that. I believe that's about a 5 or 6% budget or tax rate increase there, but we did need to cut $262,000 from the original draft that was presented to the committee. And staff were directed by the committee to make recommendations as to what should be cut, which we did. And this is where we ended up. I'm just going to run through the list. These are all the capital projects that are in the draft budget and have been approved by the budget committee. So we have an annual general facility allocation that we have, we started last year and are continuing year over year to help us address a lot of the facility related issues that were identified in the Tulloch engineer reports. They did a complete review of all of our facilities for us. This year, we are proposing that that $100,000 be allocated to repair the windows at the community center and the roof at the art gallery museum building down at the Marine Park. We also know that we need to begin to plan for a future new town hall. The one that we are currently in is not adequate, but the biggest drawback right now is that it cannot be made accessible. There is just, there's nothing that we can do to make that space fully accessible for all members of the public to get into our building. So we want to start to plan towards a replacement facility. There's some lighting at the arena, as well as one of the other things that was identified at the arena is we will need to replace the roof at a future date. It's going to cost a lot of money and we need to start planning for that now. So we are proposing to start a reserve for that project with a $100,000 contribution in 2022. We also need to repair not only the roof at the art gallery / museum building down at the Marine Park, but the windows there also need to be replaced. And the museum continues to replace their storage racks, which they began last year. $88,000 for the senior center in terms, so new doors, key fob access, so we don't have to keep dealing with keys all the time. Some roof repairs, new ramp, and dealing with insulation issues. A lot of these, again, identified in the Tulloch building reports. And the library, replace the windows at the library, and that would be a cost sharing initiative with the library board. So the total tax funded capital budget for facilities is proposed to be $423,500. The water and wastewater capital budget, the control building roof replacement has been on our list for a number of years and it keeps getting deferred. So we're going to try and include it in our 2022 budget. We also will need to replace the GAC filter media at the water treatment plant. Again, a large dollar item. So we are spacing that out over 3 or 4 years. So we have the funds already available when that project needs to be completed. We need to repair the steps at the water treatment plant. It has become a trip hazard. They have done some temporary repairs, but we need to fix that properly. We need year two of two, I believe, for new replacement actuators at the water treatment plant, and $100,000 for general treatment plant upgrades at the wastewater plant, and those will be determined in consultation with the engineers. So total tax funding for water and wastewater, $313,000. I don't think I've ever seen this list quite this short for a capital budget for our fleet and equipment, but just 2 items on the budget this year. Public Works, the sweeper needs to be replaced. It needed to be replaced last year. It needs to be replaced even more this year because they cannot get parts to fix it anymore. And the new aerial truck, which did actually receive pre-budget approval from council. So that has been ordered and will be delivered later this year. But that will be internally funded currently through the reserves, with repayments to the reserves over the next 10 years. Public services, so these are all our normal, we do these every year. So we have our surface treatment program, which is mostly funded from what used to be called the federal gas tax, is now called the Canada Community Building Fund. Our paved road rehabilitation program, this year we are funding from our OCIF formula funding grant. Our annual sidewalks of 50,000 and annual pre-engineering budget of 50,000, that to allow us to plan for our future projects and be ready if grant funding opportunities do become available. So only 135,000 of this total project list will be funded from the tax levy. And then all the other things. We have some work at the cemetery. We did a lot of work at the cemetery in 2021, and we're hoping to finish most of that in 2022 with the cemetery building repairs and some additional fencing. And we're also in year 2, I believe, of the niche expansion plan. So we'll continue on with that. Our annual contribution for building demolition reserve of 50,000, our computer replacement program. We also, on top of that, we did also replace, another pre-budget approval item was the replacement of the server at Town Hall. North Shore Power Group has asked for $25,000 to do repairs to the trash rack at the dam. And we have some additional fencing at Town Park for a little ball field close to the river. Year 2 of 3 for the Venturi Street Ball Diamond funding. We've installed a new pedestrian crossover in front of the W.C. Eckett High School, and that was year 1 of 6 to install pedestrian crossovers of a similar type in areas where they are needed around town. We are looking at replacing the communications tower, and we are exploring partnership opportunities related to that project. So that is not funded from the levy at all. The tennis courts, this project was to be grant funded. Unfortunately, the grant was denied. So we are currently exploring other opportunities and other options. The fencing itself will be replaced through our insurance, but we are still looking for ways to fund the other repairs that need to be done at the tennis courts. There is some playground equipment for the Togo playground, and we are proposing to do some upgrades to the Shervon Park over 3 years. Year 1, 2022 would be fencing, and then we would look at other equipment and other upgrades in years 2 and 3. And I don't know if you can see the picture in the corner here. That is the current state of repairs of the docks at Matinenda Landing. So we have included $70,000 to do some dock replacements and repairs at the landing for a total tax funded of $271,145. So our total capital program that we are proposing for 2022 is $3.9 million. And the total tax funding portion of that is 1.3. So 1/3 of our total capital program will be funded from the tax levy. On the operating budget side, staff has worked really hard to maintain costs, contain costs, find efficiencies, but there are some things that we do not control. One of those being the levies from other organizations. Algoma Public Health, the levy is increasing 10% over 2021. We are anticipating a similar increase from ADSAB. Consistent with prior years, though, the ROPP billing is decreasing slightly by about 1.2%. And we will be seeing some other contractor increases for landfill operations, our garbage collection, recycling, the dam operations, and we also switched handy transit operators at the end of 2021. So those costs will be an increase over 2020 and prior years. Just some visuals, you can see what the Algoma Public Health Levy has been doing over the years since 2012, from a low of 101,000 to 139,000 for 2022. ADSAB similarly has been mostly steadily increasing over the years, and we are estimating a large increase for 2022. We don't have those final numbers yet, though. So for the most part, costs are staying very similar to 2021 or decreasing. I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it again, we are going to see significant increases in the building and planning services budgets, largely due to using Tulloch Engineering as our CBO and as our main planner. We are doing as much as we can in-house, but there are some things that we do need them for. The fire budget will see a significant increase, and that is directly related to the repayment for the 2 fire trucks. And Matinenda Landing, as mentioned, we did have $70,000 proposed in the capital budget, but we are also including some money in the operating budget to allow us to do some engineering related to pathway at the landing. And just to note that the union contract was renegotiated for the 2022 to 2024 period, and that did result in wage increases of 1.5% for 2022. So all that to say that the total tax rate increase for 2022 is now sitting at 2.5%. And that works out to just under $46 per $100,000 of assessment. And as the mayor mentioned, the budget committee is recommending that council approve the proposed 2022 operating and capital budgets as they have been presented to them.
Thank you, Sue. Were there any questions sent in on the operating or capital budgets by email prior to tonight's presentation?
Not specifically relating to anything within the budget themselves, no.
All right. Well, we'll open the floor for our attendees if they wish to ask any questions or comments. As I mentioned earlier, 3 minutes per attendee, and the floor is open. Pam, do you have any hands going up?
Not at this time.
We'll give them a couple of minutes. Excellent presentation, Sue, and I know that yourself and senior management and all the departments should be congratulated. Not an easy feat pulling that back to make it within a livable budget for all of us. And does council have any questions they wish to ask Sue at this time? I think everything was asked in the months leading up to tonight's presentation. Well, seeing no one coming forward, I will say that this was a very, very quick public budget presentation, and I do thank everyone for attending tonight. And I do have a resolution moved by Councillor Jennifer Posterero, seconded by Deputy Mayor Paula Summers. Be it resolved that council adjourn the special meeting at 7:29 p.m. All in favor of this motion? And that's carried. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for your attendance. Have a great night.